Okay, we should be live. So give everyone a minute to kind of file in here. Welcome if you all are joining us. I'm just going to check and make sure if you are joining us, if you are watching, if you could go ahead and comment and let me know you're seeing us, that would be fantastic. So if you see Nick and I here in the Facebook group, we'll go ahead and get started here in a minute. It looks like we're live. Okay. Give everyone just a few minutes here to join us. We're early today, so typically we do our webinars around lunchtime. Oh, we got Leanne. Hi, Leanne. Thanks for joining us this morning. So it looks like everything's working. That's great. Yeah, we're here with Nick Gulic today. He's joining us from Sydney, Australia. So he is up late. What time is it there, Nick?
11:30 p.m.
11:30 p.m. So we really appreciate Nick staying up late to join us in the Niche Agency Owners Facebook community today and put on this great webinar for us. I'm really excited about it. I saw, Nick, your presentation back at Agency Transformation Live. It was,
Yes.
I guess, over a year ago, or coming up on a year maybe, or I'm not sure. It was a while ago.
I think it was just over a year. I think that was like May.
Right at the beginning of the pandemic. It was
like
it was really touch and go there for a while, whether it was going to be live in person. And so and that was, I think, when you first presented on Sell by Helping. Is that right?
Yeah, that's where the concept came to be.
Yeah, that was a really fantastic presentation, and it's exciting to see where you've taken it since then. So you got someone else saying hi. Welcome. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with this morning's webinar. So Hi, everyone. I'm Emily. If you don't know me, which I assume the majority of you here watching know me, but I'm Emily from GoWP. And welcome to today's webinar, Sell by Helping, a website consultant's framework for running effective sales meetings with Nick Gulic. Really quick, I just want to say a couple of words about GoWP in case anyone watching isn't familiar with us. At GoWP, it's our mission to create happiness by helping agency owners grow and increase profits. So, whether you're ready to bring on a new team member or you're looking to outsource work so you can focus on growth, we've got you covered. I also want to mention that creating a GoWP partner account is 100% free, and it gets you access to all sorts of resources to grow your agency. Currently, we have landing page templates to help you sell care plans. We have a maintenance schedule lead magnet and a landing page template to help you generate leads and increase your recurring revenue. And we have all sorts of documentation that you can take and make your own to use with your clients and prospects. And you can create that account at my.gowp.com, and we'll share some links to this in just a moment. So if you haven't created your account, go do it. Check it out. It's free. You don't have to buy anything, and you can check out the knowledge base in there. And we just added some case study page templates also for adding case studies to your site. So if you have any questions about partnering with GoWP, how we can help your agency, or any of the resources that we have, feel free to reach out. You can reach out right here in the Facebook group. You can send me a message on Facebook. You can email me, Emily@GoWP. Any of those will work. I'm here to help and happy to do it. So I hope to hear from all of you at some point. A few notes regarding the webinar. I will be watching the chat. So any of those comments, questions that come in, throw them up there and we will get them into the webinar with Nick. So just put those in the comments and we'll get those into the Q&A or work them into the presentation, however it makes the most sense. So we've already seen that the chat's working. That's great. If you're watching, just say hi, let us know where you're joining us from and what time it is for you. I know it's a new time today. So here on the Eastern time zone, we're at 9:30 a.m. So that's not too crazy for us, but Nick is in Sydney, Australia at 11:30 p.m. So we do have quite the span going on. So anyway, let's get to why we're here today. Mr. Nick Gulic. So Nick is the founder of Creative Click, a boutique digital agency in Sydney, Australia. And he also offers business coaching and consulting to other agency owners and teaches them how to sell their services in ways that are natural and ethical. And I think that's really what has been resonating with so many folks who have, seen your Sell by Helping course, which I know quite a few members of our community have already gone through that course and rave about it. So it's really great what you're doing and the message you're putting out there, Nick. So I'm excited to have you in this community this morning with us. So thank you.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here. I always miss everything that you guys do because it's always at like 3 a.m. for me.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the timing's not great for our Australia and New Zealand friends, unfortunately. But yeah, we're happy to have you join us today. So I'll just hand it over to you and take it away.
cool. All right. So in advance, guys, if I slur or if I look like I'm falling asleep, I promise I'm not super drunk. It's just tiredness, general at this time of night. So let me share my screen, and all right, here we are. Okay, so Sell by Helping, the website consultants framework for better sales meetings. So today I'm going to be walking you through the sales meeting framework that I've built up over the last decade or so, and which has helped me get more clients, charge higher rates, and work with people who respect me and my skills. So by the end of this webinar, you'll have a solid outline of how I run my sales meetings. And hopefully you'll walk away with something you can implement to get better results for yourself today. So what we'll be covering today, there's a couple different things. Why people suck at sales generally, some different approaches and different ways you can do things, the actual Sell by Helping framework, so my framework that I use and teach other people, and then we'll run through some questions and answers at the end. So probably a good idea if I explain who I am. So I'm just a semi-normal, I said normal, but probably semi-normal dude that runs a fairly normal agency here in Sydney, Australia. So I do web design and stuff like that. I also do some consulting work, mostly to other agencies, sometimes to other small businesses. And probably what I'm best at in my agency is running a sales meeting effectively, which is really good because that's what I'm going to be teaching you guys today. So yeah, it's fun times. So the way I sell is based on almost 15 years or so of doing sales related stuff. All right, let's get this party started. So sales, it's interesting and it's sometimes a scary topic. It's one of those words that are loaded with so many preconceived ideas of what it actually means. And those ideas, they tend to be stuff like sleazy, slimy, some slick talking salesman, and trying to con you into parting with your money for something you probably don't want or need. And while we don't really think that's what sales is, that preconceived idea can't help but stick around in the back of our minds when we go to do sales meetings. So what happens when we need to sell our services, when it's our turn? Well, usually pressure. You approach the meeting feeling like you need to convince the person to buy your stuff, that you need to be smooth, charismatic, good at persuading. And you know what? That approach, it works for a lot of people. But I don't know about you guys, I'm not all that charming. Despite the fact that I'm on a webinar right now, I'm actually pretty introverted. I don't like having a lot of people around me, and I'm pretty uncomfortable around people I don't know. It makes me really awkward. And I'm willing to bet that the average web designer is probably going to be more like me with that than someone like the Wolf of Wall Street. But if I can turn around and I can sell really well and sell websites at pretty high prices, despite being introverted and generally not liking to talk to other humans, then I'm pretty sure other people can do it too. So let's have a look back at learning how I learned sales. This is my first sales job. So this is me pre-beard. It's not really me. So this is where I actually learned all the stuff. So I'd gone from being an accountant. So I was doing accounting for like 6+ years, 7 years, to needing to sell accounting services in the next job. And I'd never done anything remotely salesy in my life. There was an existing person who was showing me the ropes, but it wasn't really working out for me. I couldn't talk to the people the way they did, and things just weren't going well. If I had a meeting, when I was in the meeting and I was in control, I'd get super nervous, I'd clam up, I'd start rambling, and I'd just forget everything I was meant to say as part of the pitch. And usually I'd end up agreeing to like really stupid stuff that had nothing to like anything they said. You know, hey, yeah, sure, I can pick up your laundry. What? So, and after all that, even though I'd do whatever they wanted, I still wouldn't get the sale, which really sucked. And about a month or so in, and I'd had 0 sales, and I was getting more and more pressure from both the person training me and the boss. I was already looking for another job. Sales and me, nope, not going to happen. It wasn't a good mix. And then one day, well, actually, let me make that more dramatic. And then one fateful day, the person who was training me didn't come in. And so for the first time, I actually had to run meetings with no one else there, just me. Now, you got to remember, at this point, I'd already decided I was done. I did not give a crap about getting a sale. I didn't care. I was leaving. So I just decided to go into the meeting and have a bit of fun, just talk to the people, find out what's going on, why they actually call my company for help. And an interesting thing happened. Because I wasn't trying to sell, I was just super relaxed. Like there was no pressure for me at all. And the people I was talking to, they opened up. And they opened up a lot more than other meetings I've been in, and more than when the person who was training me was talking to people, which is nuts. So they told me what was going on and the problems they were facing with their accounting. And don't forget, before this, I'd been an accountant for like 6 or 7 years. I knew accounting. It's like my domain. And because I knew accounting, I knew what was going on and I could explain it to them. And I was pretty good at sort of explaining it in a way that they could understand. And so I got to run through what was happening and how they could fix it. And then you'll never guess what happened. Well, you probably will because I'm running a prezzo on sales. So I got a sale, and not just one. I had 2 meetings that day, and I actually closed both of them, and they both became clients, which is nuts, like 100% strike rate. And that was as soon as I stopped trying to sell, which is nuts. So in that company, I eventually went on to be the top performing salesperson for like a few years in a row. And the only reason why that stopped is because they made me a manager. But there is 0 chance you would have guessed that based on the me you would have seen. Should probably click to this one. Based on the me you would have seen in those meetings, even the day before I got those sales. And the difference is I found a system that worked for me. So someone smart once said, if you don't have a system to sell, you'll be at the mercy of your prospect's system to buy. And so what that means is if you're not controlling the meeting, if you're not going the way that it's going to work for you, you're going to be relying on however the person you're talking to wants to do things. And you know what? It's not going to work in your favor. And unfortunately, this is how many web designers end up running their sales meetings. They don't really have a system to do it. Or all the systems they come across need them to be someone they're not, and just doesn't work for them. So they default to the same mistakes. They end up doing all the talking. They say yes to anything the lead wants, and they become almost desperate to get that sale and try to convince them to buy. And if that's your system, say goodbye to your dreams of premium pricing, because you'll always be limited by what the market is willing to pay for your core service. And that will be dictated by whatever the competition charge. And of course, if you do get the client, there's a really good chance they're not going to respect you as an expert, more as an extra set of hands to do whatever they say. You'll be stuck doing whatever they want, no matter how terrible it will be. And in the end, you know they're going to blame you if it doesn't work out properly. And that's why we need a framework to run these meetings. Because rather than letting a prospect lead, and hoping they magically realize how awesome we are, we can follow a process to make sure they do. And so the right framework, we've got it here. It helps you position yourself as a consultant, provide actual solutions to problems, unpack the value of what you do, increase your rates and fees, and work with people who respect you. Now that sounds pretty good. And this leads us to the mindset that you need before going to these sales meetings. And I don't mean to be fluffy, but your mindset is probably the most important thing to get right. And so here's the main thing you need to understand. Stop trying to convince people to buy your stuff. That's not your job. Your job, you're there to help them find a solution to their problem. You might have noticed earlier that this talk is subtitled A Website Consultant's Framework for Better Sales Meetings. That's because I'm not really a web designer. I don't sell websites. That's not what I do. I'm a consultant and I solve problems. And even when the solution to the problem is a new website, I'm selling the solution and not the website. So when your client sees you as the person who's going to solve a problem for them, they stop seeing you as some freelancer who's there. They stop seeing you as some freelancer who's just there to follow orders. Instead, they see you as the expert You're there to help them achieve something that matters. And that achieving something that matters, that's worth a lot more to the client than a new website or some SEO or some copywriting or whatever it is that you do. So let's get into this framework. And now this isn't something I've just made up. I've been selling a bunch of different services for the past 15 years or so. And I've trained other people, even whole sales teams, and I've traveled to do that. And I've taught them how to sell better. And so one constant I've found with the meetings that I've done best at is that they've gone through 3 distinct phases. The first phase was the period of understanding. And this is where I listen to them so I can understand the client, the problem, and their objectives. Then we go through a period of education. And that's where I do a bit more of the talking. And so I'll educate them on the reality of their problem, why they failed in fixing it previously, and then what the solution actually is. And then finally, I close things out by explaining how I fix the problem. I'll answer any questions they might have. I give them the next steps. I mean, you can almost call this education as well. I call it close because it's how we close the meeting and the deal. So phase 1, let's kick this off. The meeting started and we've gotten all the greetings out of the way. Now we're down to business. As part of the understanding phase, there's 3 key things that we really need to understand. So firstly, we need to understand their current situation. What's going on? Where are they at? How does their business work? All those sorts of things. Then we need to understand the problem they're facing and the impact of that problem. And then we need to know their objectives, why they actually reached out to us in the first place and what they're trying to achieve. Now, in most cases, clients are pretty happy for you to do your thing. But sometimes you might get a prospect that wants to run the meeting. And so they'll start out with all the questions right from the get-go. Or they might try something super offensive, like tell me what you can do for me, and have all this arrogance and like, posturing about it. And it's because that's part of their system to buy. Now, instead of playing their game, what we'll do is we'll flip things around so we have control. And if you think about it, generally speaking, control is with the person that's asking the questions. If you're asking the questions, the other person's answering, and you get to control the flow of the meeting. And so the easiest way for us to take control of the meeting is just literally getting them to give us permission to do it. So what I usually do is when someone's doing that is I'll say something along the lines of, in order to be able to see what we can do for you, I'll need to ask you some questions. Is that okay? And in most cases, they're going to say, yeah, that's fine, because you're the expert. They're not. I've only ever had a few people who had issues with that and tried to argue and tell me, no, just tell me your price. And they were just price shopping, and they weren't going to ever be clients. And I just told them I couldn't help. I didn't even bother trying to give them a price. Now, pro tip, don't play the commodity game. Commodity is something that anyone can be. And if you win that game, you are really losing. So at this stage, we've got permission to go through our process, which is great. First thing we're talking about is their situation. So this is about them and their business. And some questions we probably need to go through. Pretty basic stuff like tell me what you do, how long you've been running this business, how'd you start it, how'd you get to where you are now, what sort of clients do you normally work with, what sort of services do you offer, how do you get your clients, so on and so forth. And depending on what you're interested in and what you need to know, you can dig deeper with more and more questions. And the objective here is to get them to open up. See, people often find it easier to answer questions about themselves, and they usually love their business. Well, at the very least, they can talk about it quite a bit, but they don't always get many opportunities to talk about it without being super annoying to everyone around them. By doing this, you're making them feel more comfortable in talking to you, and you're getting the information you need to be able to start understanding the problem that they're facing, because you need context. Now that we understand the situation, we get to move on and start asking them about the problem they're facing. So as part of this process, this part of the process is very fluid because you just don't know what they're going to say. I'll often start things off by asking something like, what made you decide you needed a new website? Then I just dig deeper on every single answer. They'll give me something and I'll say, okay, and then what? Okay, and then what does that do? What does that allow you to do? What difference would that make to your life? And then you just keep asking. And this helps you get to the root of the problem, and also leads you to the impact of this problem. For example, with websites, they could be saying that they're not getting enough leads. But what does that actually mean? How many are they getting now? How many do they want to get? How many leads do they need before they get a sale? And you know what? What's a sale actually worth? And importantly, why is this a problem now? What has changed that made them need to talk to you now about it? So, without understanding the problem and without understanding the impact of the problem, firstly, you won't be able to know if it's something you can fix. And secondly, you won't even know if it's worth fixing. Some problems aren't that big, and it's not worth spending thousands upon thousands of dollars for a new website when it's not really a big deal. And speaking of fixing, once we understand the problem, once we understand their business and the situation they're in, and we understand the problem they're facing, then we can actually look at what they actually want to happen, the objective. So they might have approached you for a website, for example, but what were they expecting that website to do? Because here's the thing, no one actually wants a website. What they want is what the website is meant to give them. They don't want SEO. They want what SEO gives them. They don't want copywriting. They want the benefits of copywriting. So you need to find out what they actually want. What is that outcome that they want? So you know if the service you offer is actually going to be able to deliver that result, because it could be completely wrong. And that's the point of everything we're doing right now. We want to find out whether we can solve their problem. So let's say ultimately they want more sales. How much more? And if you didn't already find out earlier, how much is one client worth? And how many clients will it take them to reach the extra sales that they want? And if you can get back to numbers, it will make your life a lot easier because you can start to identify the value of what you're doing. I mean, let's say you have a client that wants to make an extra $100,000 a year as a result of their new website. How much is the website worth if it achieves that result? Now, what about if that was an extra $10 million a year? By making these numbers clear, not only do you understand the value of the website, but the client starts to see it too. And you can also help them see that by repeating what they're telling you. For example, it could be, so what you're saying is we need this website to generate an extra $100,000 a year in sales for you, taking your total to just over $1 million a year. Now, at this point, we've hopefully got a solid understanding of the client, the problem, the impact of the problem, and we also understand their objectives and how much those objectives are worth. Before moving on, it's a really good idea to clarify that you understood everything. And the easiest way to do that is to ask. And I usually do this before every kind of transition in the meeting. Every time I'm going to a different section of the meeting or different phase, I'll clarify everything we've discussed so far and recap. So something like, before I move on, I just want to make sure that I've understood everything. And then you give a summary version of what you just went through. And if you write about everything, that's great because you get to move forward. But if not, if you've missed something or you got something wrong, well, now you get to go back and rectify that by asking more questions. Now, you might notice so far we haven't talked about ourselves and what we do at all. It's all been 100% about the client. There's no bragging, there's no showing off, there's no telling them how wonderful we are. There's no pressure on us at all, really. You just need to talk. And we're just asking questions, listening to their answers, and we're showing them that we understand. Now, that leads us to the next phase of the meeting, which is education. Now, education, similar to understanding, happens across three core areas. Firstly, we educate them about the real problem they're facing, which might not actually even be what they were originally thinking. We educate them on why previous solutions failed. And then we educate them about our recommendation or the solution that they need. Now, the first part of this phase of the meeting is educating them about the real problem. So in my case, it might not be that the website is ugly, which is what they're telling me. It might just be that it's the wrong website for their target audience. Or they might think the website doesn't generate leads, but it's actually the wrong type of website for the marketing that they're doing. And if they're running ads, it would have been perfect. But for SEO, maybe it's not. You'll need to discover what this is for your specific industry and your specific client types. When you go through this process with them and you explain exactly what the real problem is, it's like a light bulb of realization goes off for them. These light bulbs going off, they're like a currency for you. The more light bulbs you have, the more they see you as an expert and the more they want to work with you because you're someone who teaches them things. You're someone who helps them realize things. Now, the next part of this phase, this is where you let them know why previous solutions failed, why they didn't work. And by doing this, we're showing them that we know enough not to make those same mistakes. And this is directly tied to the real problem that they have. The reason their last website failed was because it wasn't designed for their target audience. And so they only get contacted by poor quality leads. The reason why the last website failed was because it had an overwhelming quantity of information, so visitors wouldn't need to make an inquiry. The reason the last service failed was because whatever the reason might be. And you'll probably have a really good idea about this, even sometimes going into the conversation. But because we've just explained their real problem and we know their objectives, we get to make this much more compelling by showing them how those mistakes impact on the things they care about. As part of this process, you need to educate the client on why these things make a difference. Now, of course, how deep you go with educating will really depend on your skills and your experience. But you don't need to be an industry leader to educate a client. You just need to know more than they do. And you need to know enough to understand why things didn't work before or why they might not work generally. And there's a balance that needs to be struck here. You don't need to overwhelm them with information. You just need to touch on it a little bit. You just need to give them enough so they have one of those light bulb moments I mentioned, but not so much that they'll fall asleep or zone out. You don't want to come across like you're lecturing them. You just want to teach them something. And this education will help position you as an authority in your space. It also means that you're someone who can explain things in their language. If you can understand the problem and you can understand and you can explain it in a way that they're going to understand and it makes sense to them, doesn't that mean it's very likely you'll also be able to solve that problem? And that leads us very nicely into our recommendations. This is where you get to run them through what they really need. If they're there to get a website, what does that website need to have to achieve the result they're looking for? Are there certain features it needs? Certain style? This part's actually pretty easy because you're just using the opposites of the reasons why it didn't work last time. And I want to stress that if, for example, they want more leads, then you're not asking them about things like what colors they want for the site. You're the expert. You'd be telling them what colors they need in order to attract their target audience. And this might seem like a pretty long-winded way to ultimately tell them that they need a new website, but that's because you're not telling them they need a website. You're telling them they need a website built in a certain way that includes certain specific things in order to solve their very specific problem. And that's the key. That's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to solve problems. Solving the problem is the part that's actually worth money. I mean, we even figured out how much it was worth in the first phase of this meeting when we spoke about their objectives. Now, I can promise you not many people can actually educate their clients really well. So if you take the time to do this and you do it right, you stand out from your competition. And you can charge a lot more at that point because you're no longer some commodity offering a website. You're an expert, an authority who is solving a problem for them. You're guiding them through transformation. Now, hopefully, the solution they need involves your service offering. But hey, you know what? It might not. I knock back heaps of clients because they're not ready for me. They need something else. And that's okay. You're much better off telling people that they don't need you and pointing them in the right direction rather than taking their money and delivering something that won't help them. Because that's a really bad option because that's the sleazy option. It's the stuff that we don't like to do. So we want to avoid doing the wrong thing by people. We want to try to help them, which is the whole point of this entire talk is sell by helping. Now, helping is the most important thing you can do in this situation. You're a service provider. So if you help others, it helps your reputation. And in my experience, doing the right thing by leads who aren't a good fit usually ends up getting you better clients who actually are a good fit. And honestly, that good karma in helping people, it can't hurt. So now we're getting to the final part of the sales meeting, and that's the closing. So don't panic and do not let the name scare you at all. So I don't do this whole always be closing thing. It's literally just closing the meeting. I mean, you can almost call it education part 2, but that sounds dumb and you can't really brand that. So closing it is. Now, up until now, everything has still been 100% about the lead that we're talking to. But now we're at the point that we really need to bring ourselves into this. And so similar to previous phases, we're going to go through 3 parts. So firstly, we're going to cover the logistics of the solution, including how much it's going to cost them. And then we'll handle any objections they might have. And then finally, we'll give them the next steps they need to take in order for us to work together. So let's start with logistics. How will you actually do this? And this is your time to shine. This is where you get to go through your process. Does your project go through phases? What are they? How long does everything take? How many people are involved? How often will you guys communicate? How does that communication even work? And so what we're doing here is we're explaining the steps that you take to ensure you're delivering at high quality and why those steps are relevant. And we're showing the client that this is more than just going and buying a website or buying a service from someone. There's a specific process that you go through to deliver those real results that they're going to help them and that they care about. Now, as a tip, the more unique and the more in-depth your process, the more likely you are to stand ahead of your competitors. And once they're comfortable with the process you follow and they understand how it works, then we're going to let them know how much they need to invest for you to follow that process and help them achieve their result. And different ways you can pass this on, but you have to give them these details in the meeting. You can really strongly urge, do not surprise someone with a price in a proposal. Make sure they've agreed to the price or they're okay with the price in the meeting. And you could say it something like, look, to do all of these things and to deliver a site that will achieve those results we spoke about earlier, we'd be looking at an investment of around $20,000. Will that be a problem for you? In my experience, if you've run through everything properly and you're talking to the right kinds of clients, more often than not, the price isn't going to be an issue at all. But sometimes when you reveal the price, you might get some pushback. I mean, they should understand the value of what you're doing and they can see you know what you're doing and can deliver the result, which is the main thing they care about. But the price is probably higher than they expected. And you know what? That's okay. If they do push back on price or they raise some other issue, then we get to move on to the next part of closing, which is objection handling. Now, objections are things that people come up with as excuses not to buy. And your job is to take those excuses away. Pricing is one of the most common. It's something like, oh, I wasn't expecting it to be that much, or it's a lot more than the last person charged. Now, all that means is you're higher than they were expecting. They went in with an expectation of what this was going to cost, and your price is higher. They're not saying they don't want to do business with you, just that they're expecting a lower amount. So what do? Well, have to stress, do not lower your price. Please don't. You just need to handle the objection. And the best way to do this is to ask them why they think it's expensive, or what they were expecting it to be and why. So I can imagine this might seem like a lot, especially compared to the previous website you had built. But to go through our process properly and to do the level of work we need to in order to achieve the results you want, that's how much we need to charge. Or if they've compared you with a previous solution that you know didn't work, things get even easier. The main reason we're talking is because your previous solution wasn't working for you. Now, I would expect the working solution to require more investment than a non-working one. So I'd be very surprised if we weren't a lot higher. Is it worth paying more to get the result? Now, don't forget there's a reason why they're talking to you. And if you've done your job with this meeting, they understand that you're very well positioned to fix these problems. You and now they both have a good understanding of what this problem is worth to fix. So they probably want to work with you. It's just part of their brain is wired to avoid risk. It doesn't want to spend the money. It's thinking of the worst case scenarios. And so your job now is to satisfy that part of the brain and handle any issues they raise, like pricing, timeframes, anything about the process, or anything else they ask about or mention. Take away any and all excuses they have not to go ahead until they don't have any left. And if you're in doubt or they haven't raised any concerns, you can ask, do you see anything that would prevent you from moving forward with what I'm recommending? Either they'll pretty much agree to go ahead, or they'll let you know another objection that you get to handle. And then once you've got every objection handled, you get to move on to the final bit of this phase, which is where you tell them what happens next. Will you send a proposal? When will you do that? What do they do with that proposal? Is there any money they need to pay? How much? What happens then? It's pretty easy. And that's the key to finishing strong. You need to make the next steps super easy for them to do. Don't make it difficult for them to work with you. So, a quick recap of what we covered today. So we use a system to sell so we can run our meeting in a way that's going to help us get the information we need from the prospect. By focusing on delivering a solution rather than convincing them to buy from us, we're not only helping the prospect, but we're also able to position ourselves as an expert and charge based on value. And the meeting goes through 3 phases. First, we understand the prospective client and the situation, the problem, and desired outcomes. Then we educate them about the real problem they're facing, why things went wrong previously, and make our recommendation for a solution. And then we close the meeting by running through the logistics, giving them a price, handling objections, and giving them the next steps. By following this framework, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to get better results from your sales meetings. You'll be able to charge more, and you'll work with clients who treat you like an expert. And ultimately, it wasn't because you sold to them or did anything sleazy or were particularly skilled at persuasion. You did it by helping. You listened and you educated them, and that makes all the difference. So, time for a shameless self-plug. So if you've had a few light bulb moments of your own going off during this talk and you'd like to learn more, I do have a course that goes through this stuff in way more detail. I don't want to sit here like selling for ages or anything. So if you like the sound of it, you can jump onto my site, nickgulic.com/course to take you to the page where it has all the details. And considering you sat through this webinar, and we all love GoWP, if you'd actually like to buy the course and join the other 280 or so people who've jumped on board so far, you can use the coupon code GoWPRocks to get 30% off the fee, which is, I think, my biggest discount possible. So hopefully you've enjoyed the webinar and got something of value out of it. And now I think we can go through and answer any questions.
Thank you, Nick. That was fantastic. I'm just posting over here in the Facebook group. That was really great. I took some notes myself here, so I have a few questions. If anyone else has questions, go ahead and post them in the comments and we'll answer them now during this Q&A session here. I guess I don't so much have questions, but one of the things that you said and briefly touched on was you mentioned the commodity game, and that was in the first, I think one of the first steps of this process. And that if you're playing that commodity game, really you're going to end up losing. And so what kind of came to mind for me on that is, selling, like including licenses in your packages and things like that, right? All of the different line items you can include. So could you, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that and, some examples of what that looks like and why that isn't what you want to be doing during a sales meeting.
Probably the biggest way you do it is someone goes, I need a website. And you're like, cool, what color do you want? What style? Show me styles you like. Yeah, I can do that. And so you're giving them what they want, which sounds kind of like that's what we want to do, right? We want to give them what they want. But then you're just like everyone else. So it's like, yeah, cool. What features do you have that I can? Oh, well, cool. I'm going to include this and I'm going to include that. I think that's what you're kind of talking about, the value stack. And the value stack is something used commonly in marketing where to make something seem like more value, you show line items of different things that you're going to include. And it's like, this session, normally $997, free if you buy now, like all that sort of stuff. That's what people do in these webinars too. So these webinars usually end with, the pitch for the course or the program. And it's like normally this much, but for today only this much, and you're going to get all these bonuses. I don't really buy into doing that stuff. I think it's a bit scummy. So I avoid. Yeah.
No, I think that answers my question for sure and talks a little bit more about that. So I thought that was a really good comment. And I thought it'd be good to kind of talk about the examples of it. So that was fantastic. We did get a couple questions. I first want to highlight a few great comments that some of our community members made. Mm-hmm. This one from Bet here, her face isn't showing up, but this is Bet. She said, so the sales meeting is more like a medical consultation, listening, gathering symptoms, et cetera, and then giving a diagnosis. So I thought that was a really great comment.
That used to be my main story with explaining this. My main analogy was if you go to the doctor and try to tell them the drugs you need, they're going to tell you to get out of their office. But apparently in America, You can do that. You can go to the doctor and tell them what drugs you want, and they give it to you. Like, what the hell? In Australia, you can't do that. So I kind of scaled back a little bit on that story. But yeah, generally, like the way I've always spoken about being a consultant is it's like going to a doctor. They're not going to just prescribe something without diagnosing. No way, right? So we do the same thing. You've got to diagnose before you can prescribe a solution. Otherwise, how the hell do you know if you're going to fix their problem? Look, I've got a headache. Cool, take some aspirin. Like, well, actually, that was cancer, dude. Oh,
absolutely. I love that. And yeah, and Matt also commented, great analogy, but be careful not to tell John the plumber that he's pregnant. So it's also good comment there from Matt. Yeah, and you're right. You know, some of these analogies don't translate as well in other parts of the world as well. So that made me laugh there. And reminds me of one time while living in Spain that I called the doctor and said I needed antibiotics. And they're like, well, you're not the doctor, so I'll be the judge of that. Judge of that. So yeah, fair point there. We had another comment here from Chris, and she's one of our community members. Chris here says, sell by helping was a concept that she figured out years ago, and it made it possible for her to have conversations with clients. But the steps that you've outlined here is gold, she said. So that's been really helpful. Having this framework to put into place is fantastic.
Great.
And it looks like we've got a question from Matt here. So how do you stop clients taking advantage of your helpfulness? He's curious as it's something that I've seen a lot of people struggle with over the years. And that's a very valid question.
It's something I've struggled with many times. So it's something I've struggled with. And basically there's a couple of rules I have. Telling people what they should be doing, I don't mind. Telling them how to do it is something I do mind. And I won't do that for free. It happens a lot when you're in any sort of mind focused thing where in a knowledge industry. So it used to happen in accounting a lot. I struggled with it a lot more when I had my own consulting practice, because everyone's like, oh, can I just pick your brain? Like, can we grab coffee? I just want to pick your brain about this thing. And you end up outlining a marketing strategy that's worth a couple of $1,000s in like a coffee meeting. And so it's not really that fair. So I'll tell people what they need a lot. And I might even point them in the right direction of the how, but I'm not going to tell them how to do stuff. And so that's one. The other way is there's this concept called the 5-minute favor. So anything that takes less than 5 minutes, no problem. Just do it. It's 5 minutes, like no big deal. If it takes longer than 5 minutes, no, sorry, they're going to have to pay for your time or whatever it is, however you want to get reimbursed for the favor. So that's another thing. I don't really do that often. My thing is more like I don't mind telling people what they need to know, but I'm still going to tell them like how to do something, because that's then cheapening me.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic answer for that. So that's really helpful. And you can see that some of the folks watching too are enjoying that as well. Another question, not so much related to the presentation, but we've got Corey saying, great presentation. He has the course already, but where can he get the hat?
Dude, I don't know. I've set up on Printful, so I could potentially make it so people can buy it. I would offer to like send it to people, but I'm a bit tight, man. I don't want to spend that much cash.
You gotta set up a swag store, Nick. There you go.
Yeah, I've got actually two. There's another one which I don't know where it is at the moment. So I alternate between this one and my funnel packs hat,
awesome.
which is my pride and joy. So they're my two main hats, but I've got another one that has like the flat brim. It's got like a blue thing, but it just sits weird on my head. I've got this massive head, so yeah.
That's great. Yeah, so maybe in the future we'll get a swag store going for nickgulic.com.
I'll put a link up somewhere.
There you go. Says good answer and great presentation. It's definitely very easy for someone to give too much away in a meeting, especially if you quickly build up a rapport with the potential client. As an extrovert, Matt here who's talking used to become friends with potential clients way too quickly and sit in one meeting for 4 hours or 1 hour meetings for 4 hours. So yeah, that's a risk you take as well.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
no, definitely. I've done that whole become friends with the client. Like you just hit it off, and then within 10 minutes you feel like you know each other. And then I've done the same thing. I've sat there for like, like I think 4 hours actually is probably the record. 4-hour meeting with the
Wow.
client is terrible. It's so draining. As an introvert, like I walk out of those and I'm not good for anything that week.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something you want to be really careful of. And yeah, like I said, the golden rule of teach the what, or tell the what, but don't teach the how for free. That does help a lot.
Fantastic.
So,
One question regarding the pricing, and I liked what you said when you were talking about the handling the objections. And this question kind of goes toward that. But do you ever put forward your price range at the beginning of a meeting to avoid lower budget clients,
sure.
or do you always wait until the end after you've heard the full story and gone through the whole framework?
Yeah, so it depends on whether I suspect that they're a low budget client or not. So sometimes people come up and they don't want to spend money. They're looking for something cheap. And so usually what happens is we start following the process, and if they play along, I'll keep going. But if I really am and really doubtful that they're going to be someone who's going to stick around to the end, I actually usually push them through to I'll either mention price ranges at the start with an anchor pretty high, and say, so look, we do projects that are anywhere from 10 to 20,000 generally, like in for this type of site. I just want you to be aware of that before we progress, because I'd hate to waste your time. Sometimes I'll do that, and sometimes I'll actually send them to, and I don't normally use them, like an intake form, like a website worksheet type thing, and where they answer questions. And my one doesn't ask about things like style, doesn't ask about pages they want. It asks about their business, and it does ask about their budget. And the budget has drop downs, and my cheapest drop down is from 10,000 and up. And if they pick under 10,000, it tells them that like a project start at 10. So as long as they can get close to that, we can talk. And if they can't, we don't. And so I use like my website worksheet as a filter for the people that I don't think are going to be worth talking to. But otherwise, I prefer talking to them.
That's some great advice there. I think that's really smart. And I loved during that part of the presentation where you were talking about objections and pricing objections specifically. It resonated with me, because I think we've all been in a situation where you're shopping for something and a salesperson is involved, and they follow a framework similar to this. And by the time you already know going into that pricing conversation, like you've already realized that you're sold on something that you hadn't intended on going for the premium package, right? But during that last hour conversation, you're ready to buy it. And it's because of the work you laid down prior that you're open to that conversation.
It's value, right? Like we will pay for things that we value. And so clients are the same. Like, I mean, I've gone, let's say, shopping for clothes, right? Now I don't do that too often. But when I do, if I'm looking for a pair of shoes, and I might be planning on spending $100, but then I'll see a pair of really nice shoes that are like, these are the shoes I want, and I'll spend 200. I wasn't planning on it. Don't really want to spend $200, but they're the shoes I need. And so I'll buy it, right? Because I want it and because I value those at that point in time. So it's really common. And I mean, this goes back like from early stage, because I used to work at a company. One of my early sales roles was a company who were kind of seemed cheap until you actually got to, but they always did fixed fees, and the fixed fees were quite high. And so I couldn't tell people the fixed fee stuff early on, because they'll be like, no way. And so I had to make sure I established value with them first, and that's how I got the sales. And so if they value it, your price can be high and it's okay. But if they don't really value what you're doing, then there's no chance they're going to pay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's spot on. Graham, one of our community members here, he said, finding that sweet spot between not sharing too much and simultaneously wanting to add value during client meetings is so hard. Lots of room for improvement on his end, he says, but thank you for a great presentation. And he loves your Sell by Helping course and can highly recommend.
Fantastic.
So yeah, and we shared a link to the course in the comments there. And once again, if you haven't already gone through the course, Nick's been super generous, and he's offering a 30% discount to our little community here. So GoWP Rocks is the discount code, and we'll post that in the group and send that out in an email as well, so everyone can have that. So let's see.
Hang
We
on.
have
There's a dance question.
there's a dance request here. Yeah, let's get to that. Let's see. Here we go. So as an introvert, what's your pre-meeting dance routine to help you get your game face on? And the follow-up to that question is, how long can we keep Nick up? Follow up to Matt's dance question. Can you demonstrate it for us?
All right. So it depends on whether I'm standing up or sitting down. If I'm standing up, usually like a bit jumping around type stuff. I'm not really that good at a dancer. And I do the thing with the hands in front of the knees. I'm not going to demonstrate it. Sorry. And if I'm sitting down, I'm like, I pump myself up. I'm like, come on.
So is this real? Yeah. Do you really do that before these meetings? Okay, cool.
Yeah, not always. I smile. So if you smile before a meeting, usually go into that meeting feeling happier, and it makes a big difference to everything. Like when you pick up the phone, smile before you pick up the phone. These are tips like from having to talk to people a lot when I didn't feel like it. Smile before you about to have a conversation. It makes a big difference to your general vibe and to your voice. It comes across in your voice, and so you can have much more pleasant conversations with people who maybe weren't intending to be pleasant.
I love that. I think that's a great tip. And really, really smart too. And I think it does change your how your demeanor, I guess, for those calls. Without seeing, well, there's one last question. Nick, who's your favorite Kyle? I think our viewers are just
okay. So I think yeah. Look, I think I'm gonna have to say Kyle Van Dusen is my favorite. He's the winner. And I'm sorry to all the other Kyles. You're close, but come on, man, it's Kyle.
Heard it here. It's official. All right. Well, Nick, thank you so much. I was reading one of the comments. Thank you so much for this presentation. It's been fantastic, so helpful. And really just a great framework. And I know sales is something that we talk about a lot in this group. We talk about it on our happiness hour calls. It's something that people struggle with. It's something that a lot of people aren't comfortable with. So it's an important topic. Yeah. And the framework that you've put forth is something that I know has already helped a lot of folks in this community, because I know a lot of them have already gone through the course and really learned a lot from it. So thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you so much for staying up so late and joining us in this group for this webinar today. And for everybody watching, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And we will see you inside the Facebook group. If you have questions, if you're watching this recording, Nick's in the Facebook group. So, just post your questions as a comment here, and he'll get back to you after he's slept for the night and taken some time. So thank you so much. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we will see you at the next webinar. See you in the group. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.